This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 116.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Kennerman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Mindful Minute Rogers. Matt, how we doing, man?
I'm great. It was my birthday yesterday.
I actually wish you happy birthday, too, on your birthday.
I was proud of you. You know,
you thanked me not on your birthday.
Just so many people reaching out for my birthday. It wasn't that you were low on the list. I didn't get back to anyone. So
the list was too long. I assume most of our listeners reached out to you.
That's right.
To wish you a happy birthday.
Appreciate you all. So no, I'm doing well. I am just feeling loved, feeling full, feeling in the right mindset, and ready to go, which kind of goes into our episode tonight.
Yeah, tonight was a little bit different, and it was fun. We talked about instruction. We talked about ways to incorporate movement, ways to incorporate creativity, and to be mindful in the classroom. And so our guest tonight, Sarah Finnis, really just opens her eyes to things that we know are important. And to quote myself, are really easy to do and really easy to forget to do. And so I think it's a good reminder for us to stop, to pause, and to think about how we are incorporating really, really short, really, really simple, mindful, and also creative activities that we can do in our classroom.
Well, I think one of the things we brought up to give myself credit is a lot of times we look at transition as instructional dead times. And I know for me, Ken, you might be different. I felt like I was always striving to figure out how could I either make the transition as quick as possible or as productive as possible. And a lot of this comes down to having a read on your class. And I know I mentioned it in the episode a little bit later, but you have to recognize whether up or down or what is needed in your classroom. If your kids are coming in and there's a lot of animosity because there was a last minute goal in soccer and people are arguing if it was after time. I'm sure that's never happened in your classroom, Ken. Or it is a muggy, gray, overcast Monday morning and the kids are not positive they woke up yet. What do you need to do in those moments to unlock the follow-up learning and making it purposeful? So these are all things that are very obvious. I just think tonight's conversation is a brief reminder of why those are important and simple things, as you mentioned, that are in the tool belt that we don't always grab, but have value beyond has worth to take the 2-3 minutes to incorporate to make the rest of the lesson successful.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the reminder to pay attention to your students I would say in a proactive way instead of a reactive. You're reacting proactively. You're recognizing where your students are at and can you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish, or do you need to sacrifice 3 minutes of instruction to regulate them to accomplish more in the remaining 44 minutes than if you just plug through and push through for 47 minutes and it becomes a drag and it just becomes a behavior management nightmare. So I think tonight is that this podcast is that good reminder for that, and also some strategies and how you can incorporate that into your classroom. So let's check in with our Teach Better Network reminder and jump right into our conversation with Sarah Finnis.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Great. Thank you both for having me.
Absolutely. I'm personally really excited for this conversation. As we dig through it, I think our listeners will find out exactly why. But to start things off for us, real simple, just officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of what your career has looked like related to education.
Yeah, so I have a background in early childhood education and art education. So I've started working with 2-year-olds, and then as I grew in my teaching career, moved all the way up through teaching middle schoolers, and just had so much fun with a maker space and helping kids bring their ideas to life and planning, putting their ideas down on paper and kind of getting a plan together and building something however they see it.
So it's kind of funny. Matt and I have done a lot of professional development. We actually ran an event for a few years related to STEM, and Makerspace was a huge part of that. So that event started in 2016, I think, Matt, maybe 2017. And the idea of a makerspace was kind of new to me when we started that event. And we have never, I don't think we've ever even said that word on this show, 116 shows in. So for our listeners, how would you define a makerspace in your own words? And where do you think it fits in a regular public K-12 public school?
Yeah, so in my experience, the makerspace had a variety of materials from cardboard to recycled bottles, all out in children's reach. So it was visible. Kids knew where to find different kinds of crafting and building materials. Uh, it was mixed in with paints were available, markers, and it just added an element of creativity. So someone that necessarily didn't feel like they drew well could say, I want to build my idea out of recycled materials. Here's what I'm thinking, and bring their idea to life, even if they don't see themselves as an artist necessarily.
So Matt, I promise I'm going to let you talk tonight, but I want to dig into this a little bit more. So you're referring to it in an art classroom, which is interesting because that's something that I've never really experienced or dove into. So how were you utilizing the makerspace to still teach the students the quote unquote necessary skills that they needed to learn in your art class, while also kind of fostering that creativity for them and not making them feel restricted by it?
Yeah, just working with the different teachers with whatever projects they were working on. So if they were studying a specific animal's environment and they wanted to showcase uh, the animal in its environment, they would come up with a plan and write that down on paper as far as the materials that they would be interested in using to bring their idea to life. So some kids may want to make a diorama, or some kids would want to build it out of Legos. So putting their plan of action down on paper as far as what they would use, and then using the materials of their choice to present their information. So it was a good way to get the kids moving around the room and being able to express themselves in their own unique way.
Well, I think, Ken, kind of what you're getting to, it now that you bring that point up, it seems almost silly to not have considered. I feel like the art style classroom was the original makerspace, where you had all of these useful materials useful in your perspective. I feel like art teachers, another man's trash is every art teacher's treasure, is very much you guys find creative ways to use the materials available to create beautiful products and outcomes from those. But the flexibility of utilizing those materials, I feel like it goes hand in hand. From my perspective, I feel like I sit there and say, oh yeah, makerspace is where I dedicate a part of my regular ed classroom where I have just a wild assortment of these materials and they can go and be creative, but it feels very unstructured. And I'm sure your version is much more successful than what I attempt in my classroom.
There's still a little bit of, you need that freedom. Um, so there's a little bit of that, but I think it really gets them charged up about what they're doing and taking control and planning. Okay, this is how I'm going to get to my destination. And someone that thinks more like engineer kind of mind is going to be just as enthusiastic about it as someone that likes drawing.
What kind of structures do you put in place to help facilitate that type of learning environment for students? So how are you scaffolding and supporting students who may struggle through the open-endedness of it and kind of putting their plan together while at the same time not creating so many structures that you end up with the same products from every kid?
I think, at least for me, getting to know the kid's personality and what they're interested in um, can help a lot with determining that. And then I think just exposure and, um, getting used to making choices. So maybe giving them, would you rather build something or paint something, and kind of lessen the choices? What has been your experience with that?
I mean, I'll speak for myself. I feel like I really did struggle, Ken, to identify what are those boundaries in. I guess I'll back up and say I feel like my exposure and my classroom inclusion of a makerspace was so haphazard that I didn't have a clear objective of why I was including it. And Sarah, I am all ears to just kind of pull back in because I have so many of these spaces and resources. Even like I have things like an area for green screening that I underutilize, but I feel like I always struggled to find the clear purpose behind the I guess I could justify it, but I never necessarily could align the dots to say this really made a difference in my classroom environment or the outcome of product or the depth of knowledge that they would get, because mostly I probably was not setting them up for success.
Yeah, I think you really hit it on the head there with the why piece. I think it's so important to know why you are using that, and whatever the reason is, I don't know that there has to be this incredible reason why, but there is a reason why, and you know what that reason is, and you've made it clear with the students. This is why we're doing this, or this is why this might look a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, so they understand that too. And I have found in my experience when trying something that's more open ended, whether it involves a physical makerspace or it involves nothing related to a makerspace, but it's a more open ended experience than you typically do with students, less is better. It's so much easier to see where you missed the scaffolds needed than to see where you put too many scaffolds in. So what I mean by that is if you have the bumpers up on a bowling on a when you're bowling you might have them up and not realize that you don't need them. You're not paying attention to how many times did I actually hit it. Whereas if you have the bumpers down and you say, wow, I've, 50% of my shots are gutter balls, I do need the bumpers, right? So even now as an instructional coach, we just did a session with new teachers. We had them film a lesson ahead of time, and they were coming to one of their sessions to watch that lesson and reflect. And as a team, we had never done this before. And we were talking about what questions do we want them to have? How do we want to run this session overall? And I said to the team, I said, I think we have a good plan. It's very limited that we have planned. Let's go with this and see what we missed. So I would encourage teachers, if you're trying a makerspace, or you're trying these open-ended things, have a clear intention of what you're trying to accomplish and why, but less is better. Look for the gaps and then do a better job the second class or next year. And I think that's a key piece for that. So Sarah, I know that art has been go ahead, Matt.
Can I just, maybe both of you can sell me a little bit more, because I want to ask one more further thing. I feel like doing research on so many features that we bring into classrooms, whether it's sensory corners or makerspace or these different attributes, specifically when we're dedicating space or time in our day to an idea that we think is good for kids, that we're not completely sold on. Can you kind of speak to that? And what I mean by sold on is maybe we can't identify the why, but we've sat on so many podcasts that we don't need to make those decisions for kids. We don't need to be in control of all. And I think you're saying safeguards and guiding principles and maybe having a scope, not a sequence to it. How do you find yourself going beyond justifying towards like having an intended purpose and then being open to other possibilities? Because I could put it in the corner and never use it for 180 straight days very easily if I'm not intentionally including something. On the flip side, if the kids are using it and benefiting from it, you bet that I'm using it 180 out of 180 days.
Yeah, I think it can be a great station as far as moving around the room. And for why, if you have a specific if you're learning about a specific culture, then giving the kids room to pick something about the culture, whether it's the food or the fashion or something that interests them, and then using the maker space as a way for them to create something so they can present the information that they've learned. That's how I found most success in it. So then they are showing you what they have taken from the lesson, but had fun in being creative to bring that to life for other students. And I think the sharing of what they created is not just helpful for them in their public speaking, but kids can learn really well from listening to their peers share what they've learned as well too.
Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit of hands-on projects like that, and utilizing a makerspace is that communication piece, whether it's them working collaboratively and communicating with each other, or like you said, showcasing what they built, why they built it, how they built it. And in terms of the making use of it, this is going to be more of an elementary answer as a self-contained teacher, but you just having it in the room is a huge win, because indoor recesses, morning work time, bus dismissal time, you can start to pay attention. Are kids interested in it? Are they going there? And maybe you have to explicitly say, hey, you can go back and tinker here whenever you want during these times. Is there an interest? Are they doing that a lot? And then that's a skill set that you can tap into when you do certain activities, and maybe other years you don't have an interest. So you can make two decisions. You can decide, all right, maybe I won't use it that much this year. It doesn't seem to be an interest level of my students. Or maybe I need to be intentional and expose them to that to develop an interest for these students in this type of learning. So it just there's so many ways to approach it, and I think again it's that in being intentional piece with how you're utilizing it. But makerspace, regardless, I just think it's important for students to be able to display their learning in different ways so that they can be creative, they can feel more empowered with their capabilities, tapping into their strengths, and exactly what you just said, Sarah, is that communication piece. And I've recently been doing a design challenge going around all 7 elementary schools with one of our other coaches. We've been in about 20 classrooms and we have about 45 more planned. And it's so apparent when we go into a classroom if students have been exposed to collaborative design challenges before because of the way they communicate with each other. And so it's so important to create opportunities, whether it's a design challenge or just a group project, but creating opportunities for students to collaborate and communicate with each other to develop those skills. So, Sarah, I know that art is a big part of your background, but I believe also just from some things that you shared with us prior to coming on the show that motion is a big part of your passion and what you're doing with education. So can you share a little bit more with us about that and the connections there?
Yeah. So recently I have earned my yoga and personal training certification. So bringing the movement aspect and blending it in with the art education and just incorporating movement into teaching um, is my new uh, passion right now. So teaching kids through movement, I think, really gets them energized about what they're learning as well. And for me, I know I'm a hands-on learner, and sitting in at a desk for some learning is good, but moving around and uh, getting that energy out helps a lot, and um, gets their whole self into whatever you're talking about.
So I just kind of using. I apologize if it continues to sound like I'm just. This is coming from a perspective of trying to learn more and gain. So often, I feel like teachers like myself have used things like Go Noodle, where it's movement and going and getting yourself out of your seat, waking up your whole body. But again, one of those things that we do it because other teachers do it. Ken, I know from your understanding of kinesthetic classroom style techniques, as well as Sarah, obviously, most specifically yoga, but your research and your passion, how does that set up for the students to go forward and be more productive in your class because it awakens so much more than just a transition?
I For me, I think if they have a lot going on in their mind, then it's hard to focus um, their attention on just taking in information and just pouring it in there. Where if they're moving around, it gets their awareness more into their body rather than trying to not think about something that is bothering them still, and kind of take that edge off. And then I think it's cool to see kids, use movement in creative ways as well. So whether they uh, create movements to match what they're learning about, or a game to help, use it in their own way, however comes to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I brain breaks and like you said, Matt, using Go Noodle is something that you can easily use at any time and easily forget to use for the longest amount of time because it just becomes becomes one more thing, and it requires you to remember to do it, that thought of doing it in the moment. But we all know it's so important. And I was recently working with a middle school teacher who wants to run a professional development session that I'm going to support her on just regulating and deregulating students. And she's a special ed teacher, and recognizing what the students are thinking or how they're feeling, and realizing that if they're coming in overregulated, the investment of a 3-minute exercise or a 3-minute brain break or a 3-minute brain activity or something that calms them and gets them regulated is going to benefit the last 41 minutes of the lesson. Even when you have a ton to teach and you as the teacher are ready to rock and roll, as soon as the class starts, giving up those 4 or 5 minutes is going to pay dividends on the remaining 41 minutes of that lesson, because the students are going to be mentally and physically prepared to be able to, like you said, Sarah, to take in that information and to benefit from that instruction. So do you have some specific strategies that you recommend for teachers to use with students, whether they're some movement-based activities that someone who's not a yoga instructor can still implement into their classroom, or things that we can use as teachers?
Yeah, I would say just kind of opening the movement aspect up as a challenge. So, how can you share this information through movement? So, a book that I wrote for kids teaches them about landmarks around the world. So, them using their bodies um, to share information again, whether they are balancing, however they want to showcase whatever they're learning about, but just allowing them some room to be creative in it as well.
I know a lot tied with yoga is obviously the physical movement that is beneficial, but can you also speak to like the mindfulness and the other like maybe holistic approaches that go along with the physical movement that really draws out whether it's calmness or that overregulation? What are some of those other features and things that you're saying along to make it further well-rounded, if you will?
Yeah. So anything where you're able to bring them back to like their senses, any of their 5 senses. So if something is in their mind, if they come back in from recess and somebody said something and it bothered them, and that's just they're in their head, um, bringing their attention back into their body. So having them like close their eyes and imagine feeling their breath moving up and down their spine, or closing their eyes and bringing their awareness into their hands. Something where they're getting out of their mind and putting their attention somewhere into their body.
Are there also any suggestions you have of outside resources of places you would have teachers that are specifically interested in including those features, whether it's them leading or maybe an online resource that can kind of support them as they bring these features into the classroom?
That is a good question. I do not have one off
That's
the
totally fine if you don't.
top of my head.
I'm just thinking like I know that, for instance, I've used like Calm was during the pandemic, was one that at least as background music, well, music is, I don't know if the right way to put it, but just settling and talking about breathing, there was meditation that was embedded into that, although sometimes it was kid friendly, sometimes not that it was never or ever not kid friendly, but sometimes it was directed more towards kid friendly language or vice versa. Ken, do you have any resources? I use a Classroom Alexa, and I have a few apps that are embedded into our Classroom Alexa that the kids will put on if they feel like they're doing independent work. Do you have anything, Ken?
No, I don't have anything specifically for guiding like a meditative practice or something like that, other than what you said about Calm, or there are some just short assets on YouTube and other things, but utilizing peaceful music or just instrumental music during different learning times was something that did it. And a lot of times I tried to use music to set the tone for what the expectation was for learning. So many times I would play music that they enjoyed that was very upbeat at times where I wanted them to be very energetic and excited, and then other times music that was very calm and quiet, when I wanted that out of the atmosphere. When I taught STEM, a lot of times when they were doing design challenges, or they were doing things that were very exciting and very active in that creativity phase, it was that type of music. And then when we hit cleanup time, and they came into my room for 45 minutes and they had to be out right on the dot, our cleanup time was that calm, peaceful, silent music, so that they could wind down, so that they were also a little bit calmer when they were heading back to their regular classroom.
Putting one hand on their chest and one hand on their stomach. So as they breathe, they're feeling their breath moving in and out of their body, and just starting from their lower stomach and feeling their breath moving up, and then exhaling and releasing from the top of the chest all the way back down. So they're doing those nice deep breaths there. Also using like your hand and inhaling up a finger and exhaling down is another good one.
Do you have any other tips like that? Because I
Those are
love
great,
both of those that you just shared.
There's a square as well. Just drawing a square and then using your finger to follow inhale this way and then exhale down, inhale. So then they've got that sensory and the visual there as well.
My limited perspective is that called box breathing? I know that's a pretty obvious name.
That is exactly what it is.
So often referred to, and I even think some of these strategies are like, my wife's a 4th grade teacher, and she has really pushed her own love of kind of finding her mindset, as setting a positive mindset to be able to go into a day regardless if it's challenging or not. It's always hectic, that's for sure. So when she is mentally prepared using some of these resources, she is able to be better prepared. And I know things like morning meetings, we can very quickly sense if the kids are coming in from recess and they need a moment to settle, or if they're really sleepy, if they need a moment to come to life a little bit. And I think what you're both talking about is, how do we do that as productively as possible? Because there are productive ways by all means that we can make that transition, make that shift. And there are also very much so non-productive ways that we could lose control of the class or go down a rabbit hole because we pushed the wrong button and they were already amplified, and we made that much louder, if you will.
Sarah, do you think there are any other small little activities or exercises that teachers can do and or students can do, or they can do together? So those couple very simple breathing exercises you just shared would take 10-20 seconds in a classroom. Start of the class, mid class, end class, whenever it is, we all do that very simple box breathing, or putting the two hands on the field of breathing for 20 seconds. Is there anything else, whether it's stretches, movements, or other breathing exercises that teachers can easily do very quickly in their classroom?
If having kids pair off and just sitting back to back, so they are focused on trying to align their breath with each other. So not talking, but just feeling And so that's bringing them their awareness into their own body, but then aligning it with whoever they're sitting back to back with.
I love that. I could absolutely see that being a challenge of them if they are able to align. Who is the leader, who's not? Even Ken, I know we talk about seeing early on an activity like that could kind of see, or maybe have the kids debrief. Who did you find yourself trying to force to match your partners, or did you kind of set your own expectation and try to have your partner match you? Did you just hope that you magically were in tune or aligned? I think, Ken, you talked about music without words. They talk a lot about words can often take away from, because the kids are listening for the words and trying to understand, but things like orchestra and all these other like, whether it's strings or more calming style of music, what are some of your resources, Ken, that you're going to get those type audio files? Are you doing things like YouTube, or are you sticking more towards like a calm style? I know the classic, right by the holiday times, you throw on your TV a fireplace and it has the Christmas carols in the background. But what are you doing in the classroom to pull those rich materials in?
So for a while, going back to, let's say, 2015, when I was doing this, I was literally like downloading the songs to my computer and um, and doing that. Amazon Music has been one. I've recently found one. Shout out to one of my coaching friends. There is a person on Spotify that has the greatest classroom playlist possible for teachers, and I want to pull her up and make sure that I have the right one here. I'm gonna.
You're failing, Ken. I mean, I don't know what you're.
All right, I got it.
Okay, all right,
I got it. So yeah, like I said, there's this person that has unbelievable playlists on Spotify. I don't have a Spotify premium, so I do have to deal with the commercials every once in a while. But if you search Miss Bensko, Missbensko, she has playlists of different themes that I have yet to find anyone that has any inappropriate songs. I'm pretty sure she like goes one at a time, and not only just like no curse words, but the innuendos too. I remember one time I was on Amazon Music, and it was clean, let's say clean pop, and there were no curse words, but there was not a single clean song in that playlist because of the the innuendos of that. So Miss Bensko, she's got 90s. She has songs about love, March Madness. She has Rock Your School, which gets kids pumped up. She has Pump Up. She has Oldies. She has New and Now. She's got instrumental, holiday school appropriate. It's all great. So I would highly recommend you look at her, and she really can hit the mood piece for you on what you're looking for in your classroom. So that would be my top recommendation, and I will link up to that in our show notes.
Ken, you missed the most important, the Taylor Swift classroom. I don't think you said that one. Just saying.
She's a Taylor Swift one?
She does, We're big Swiftie fans.
I don't see it on my screen
Ken
yet.
and I are going to go see her over the summer,
Swift.
so.
That's right.
All right, that's not true. My wife's going.
So do you have any other quick activities that we can do before we jump into our exit ticket here with our last questions for you?
I just wanted to circle back really quick back to the makerspace. Having, if there isn't very much interest there, having a challenge where you're just putting out certain materials. So like maybe it's marshmallows and toothpicks, and building who can build the tall, how can you build the tallest tower? But then saying, okay, as you're kind of opening up the makerspace, saying, okay, these are the only materials that are available, and here's the challenge. So then it's not everything all at one time. And this is what we're aiming towards. How are you going to use these materials to do that? So it's, more focused, and the materials are right there, and it's not just a free for all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think there's two. I'll let you jump in after me, Matt. I think there's two real concrete ways to do a design challenge or a makerspace challenge. One is you give them all the same exact materials, and they have a common goal or a common challenge. Or the flip side is they have a common challenge, but they have no restriction on materials, and that's going to create more chaos in the classroom. And I would recommend teachers who have not done design challenges to go with the first example I gave, where you give them a restricted set of materials. But it's the what type of creativity do you want out of them? What were you going to say?
Well, just to add on to it, we have a friend of ours, Ken and I, Ryan Anthony, who recently I saw with a design challenge. He assigned real world disabilities or challenges to members of the team in the design challenge. So it might be he took things like a pair of safety glasses and put painter's tape across them, so there was very limited access to eyesight. But the person that was wearing those glasses was the only person that was able to have the fine motor skills, whether it's like shooting a ping pong ball in a basket, something that seemed very obvious and easy, and people are saying, okay, I'm going to grab these materials. But the moment you have this hindrance, it might have been like an arm tied behind your back, or you had to kind of flip these different features. Those added challenges didn't necessarily have to be material based. They could also be real world based of, here is a limitation. How could you overcome that limitation? Which on what seems to be such an obvious feature. One of the questions I love to ask you, Sarah, is by incorporating things like both yoga skills as well as makerspace, what are some of those other brilliances that you see in kids that came out of it, whether it's soft skill development or other features that you felt like you got and were able to turn into good later on in your classroom that day or in the future classes that you would teach?
I think just seeing kids pass on what they have learned through a material, and what success they've had with a particular material, and passing it on to another peer. So sometimes, even as a teacher, kids are able to reach other kids better, and just seeing them share their ideas, through what they've discovered for themselves. So teaching, if it's a particular movement or stretch, then seeing the kids give each other tips on how to do it, or just encouraging them, kind of seeing the trail of it, I think is
if a kid sees something that they're really enjoying, specifically stretching and kind of getting their everything functioning properly, I would imagine you probably didn't set times that they had to do it. Hey, you can't do this until our buzzer goes off and we're hitting a transition. What was kind of your flexibility in that realm? Like if a kid wanted to stand and stretch while you were doing an activity, were they free to do so? Did you put any parameters on that if they found something that you had instructed that they really connected to?
So I guess for me, it's been a little bit different, just not being the main teacher. So as a side creativity, I think having them move their body around. So I was more open to it as long it was safe movement, but stretching when they're kind of in their creative process, I think is good. And I think that helps. I mean, for me, when I'm creating, I like to move around and
Yeah, I think that's so important. Just giving them that freedom, especially depending on the age level, depending on the types of students that you're working with. So I want to transition into our exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1: what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
um, I would say just meeting them where they are. Um, so understanding, hey, this someone's not having the best day, so they're not going to be, driving as hard or as open and receptive, um, rather than trying to push information down. What about for you all?
No, I mean, I think that's a very valid one that we've heard in previous episodes, that when we can find where they are, that builds a relationship. It allows for connection. It leads to so many possibilities with the kids. Um, the next question that I am fascinated to hear is, you have a wide experience. What is a piece of advice that really stands out to you? Maybe your best piece of advice when working with kids that you've ever received from a colleague, maybe possibly a supervisor or even a student.
um, Using what the kid is passionate about to kind of translate the information. So if you can compare it to a sport that they like, um, so that you're talking their language, I think that is helpful. And um, just your own passion. If you're excited about what you're sharing, then they're going to be excited about it. Where if it's not something, if you're not sharing that enthusiasm, it's harder for them.
To fall in line.
Um,
That makes total
yeah.
sense. So the next question really is that we all recognize that there are times, especially in a school year, where it goes in waves. There are definitely days, possibly weeks, that we struggle to survive. What's a message you could give to educators that they need to hear to help power up through those moments of struggle?
That is a good question. um, I would say, you know, take care of yourself, even if you just need uh, to take a second, um, because if you're coming from a reactive place, then you're going to get a different kind of behavior. Um, so, coming back to that deep breathing yourself, if you can, so that you are coming from a grounded place when you're interacting with them.
Yeah, that's so important. So this really ties into the makerspace piece. What do you think? Uh, it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. Sarah, what do you think separates the teachers who are the ones who are seeking to innovate their classroom and are seeking to try new creative strategies? What do you think motivates them or separates them to do so?
I think seeing their efforts play out in action, whether it's a kid saying, giving you a hug, or like, thank you, that was really great, or a specific um, recommendation or like feedback that they really took to. I think one small comment, or, thank you, really can drive a teacher, to keep
I
going.
totally agree. So our last question is very simple. How can our audience continue to connect with you? I know you have a book, as well as you have other ways to be in contact to continue the learning?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's Sarah, SARAH, care, CARE underscore SWFL.
And where can I have your book a link for Amazon? Is that the best place for our listeners to check out your book?
Yeah, there in Barnes & Noble.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a unique perspective and something that we haven't really talked about much on our show. And if anything, to represent just that idea of being mindful and taking that minute to breathe, I think it was nice for us to slow down and to think about ways that we can incorporate that into our classroom. So I have any website we talked about tonight, as well as those musical playlists in Sarah's book, I have linked up on the show notes if you're watching or listening to this, or on our website at powereduup.com. Thank you so much for listening, as always, each and every week. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
As we power down this episode, Sarah, you leave us feeling powered up. Thank you for your time. And everyone, we hope you have a great week. We will talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.